Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our next session titled Reducing Enteric Emissions Solutions on the Way. My name is Denise Molinax, and I'm the Executive Director for the California Dairy Research
I
Foundation,
can't hear
or
Denise.
CDRF. I'll be moderating this session. A little bit on CDRF, if you're not familiar with us, we are primarily funded by the California Milk Advisory Board, or CMAB. So we're funded by California Dairy Producer Checkoff dollars. We fund research and scientific education programs in environmental management, as well as several other key areas on behalf of the dairy industry. And we are truly honored to be working on behalf of our state's dairy producers. I'm very pleased to be moderating this session this morning. It's an area of great interest, one that CDRF has started to provide funding in. Reductions in enteric emissions has been mentioned already multiple times during our summit. As we all know, California has very ambitious goals for dairy and livestock methane emissions reductions, including enteric emissions. Those overall goals cannot be met without enteric solutions. Feed additives will play a central role in achieving these reductions. Our panel today will help us learn more about the leading feed additives, their commercial availability, and their scalability as a potential solution for California and livestock herds around the globe. So on the panel, I'll first introduce our panel members. We have several of them. I'll then ask them each an initial question to help start the discussion, and then we'll move into follow-up questions. We will take questions from the audience, so if you have a question, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. I've got it pulled up here on the left, and as long as technology is working, we should be able to pull them into the discussion for a real fruitful dialogue. All right. So our panel members, first we have Dr. Ermias Kabrab. Dr. Ermias is the Associate Dean of Global Engagement and the Director of the World Food Center for UC Davis. He conducts research on the impact of livestock on the environment. He is a contributing author to the latest IPCC update and chaired the feed additive and methane committees of the FAO. His research was in the top 10 of all research conducted at the UC system in 2021. He is a regularly invited speaker and even gave a TED Talk in 2021. In addition to him, we have Joan Salwin. Joan is the CEO of Blue Ocean Barns. Blue Ocean Barns is the maker of brominata. Brominata is a variety of asparaginopsis, which is a red seaweed. It's an all-natural feed additive, a natural digestive aid, and a source of minerals that helps improve the nutritional value that cattle can derive from their feed. It grows in California and in Hawaii. And prior to coming into Blue Ocean Barns, Joan was a managing director for Accenture, a global consulting firm for over 20 years before building a team at Stanford to explore the efficacy and the safety of red seaweed as a feed additive. In addition to Dr. Ermias and Joan, we have Mark Van Newland. Mark is the vice president of Bovaer with DSM Nutritional Products. Mark is based out of Switzerland, but really he works wherever there are cows. He works with his team to further sustainability of ruminant production systems through innovation. He's currently the global program director for 3-NOP, a methane inhibitor that is on extensive testing. And 3-NOP was featured in 2019 by the World Resources Institute as one of the 10 breakthrough technologies that can help feed the world sustainably. We also have Mr. Thomas Hafner. Thomas is the CEO of Moorow. He founded Moorow, in 2018. He is also a co-founder of the life science venture Zaluvida Ventures and the chairman of Neem Biotech, an innovation and incubation platform. He has more than 27 years of experience as a serial life sciences entrepreneur with a track record of fostering successful businesses with best-in-class product propositions in consumer health, biotech, and agritech. And last but not least, we have Mr. Peter Williams. Peter is the CEO of Advantech Associates and a partner in FeedWorks USA. Peter's been working with essential oils in Europe and North America for over 30 years. He worked in the UK with the country's largest agribusiness company, Dalgety Agriculture, in a range of technical and management roles. He was also the general manager of feed additives for Akzo Nobel in the UK and Ireland before moving them to the US. He now lives in Davis, California, where his company, Advantech Associates and FeedWorks USA, is the exclusive distributor of the Agrelin range of essential oil products in the US. So welcome to you all. We're very thrilled that you're here with us this morning, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion. I'm going to start by asking a question of Dr. Kabrab. Dr. Kabrab, you're a leading expert in the area of enteric methane emissions. And as I mentioned earlier, you chaired the feed additive and methane committees of the FAO. And we know you've been studying several feed additives with trials here in California as well. Could you please share your perspective on what's happening with enteric solutions globally and the types of solutions that are being explored here in California?
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, sure. There continues to be a lot of interest and research being conducted, mostly focused on enteric methane emissions around the world. In low-income countries, the focus has been to improve productivity, which will then reduce the methane intensity from livestock production. This has been happening through development of things like ration formulation software and introduction of novel feeds and more of concentrate use. Local feeds are also being analyzed to see if there are any antimethanogenic properties. In the tropics, plants that contain tannins, saponins, or those that have better digestibility, such as legumes, have been explored to try to reduce methane emissions. In high-income countries, particularly in North America, and Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, there's quite a lot of work that has been conducted in the last few years. Those that have pasture-based production systems, such as Ireland and New Zealand, they have continued to work on improving forage quality, digestibility, with the objective of reducing enteric methane emissions. However, most work on the enteric has been focused on understanding of the microbiome, looking at the genetic selection for low-emit animals, and of course, feed additives. We will hear from the representatives of the most promising feed additives shortly, so I won't steal their thunder. But we are seeing a lot of work on feed additives coming out of California, which has huge interest in trying to reduce emissions. And scientists in California have worked with all of the panelists and continue to work to help get the feed additives onto farmers' hands and as quickly as possible. And at any given time, if you come to UC Davis, you will see at least 2 to 3 research conducted on feed additives. So there's other work happening now, but just focus on feed additives. There's usually 2 to 3 at any given time. So that tells you the importance of this and why we're trying to accelerate this as well. Just related to that, we have also developed a protocol so that when feed additives are ready, and some are already available, there is a way to calculate the carbon reduction, and that can be used for carbon crediting by any agency that accepts the protocol. We have to work with, we are working now with the California Air Resources Board to try to get this protocol accepted in California. So it's a very exciting time to work in enteric methane mitigation, and it's a lot of work that's been happening globally as well as locally in California.
Thank you. A couple of follow-up questions for you. So what are the requirements that a feed additive must meet in order for it to be determined as safe and ready for successful use or widespread adoption here?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, there is a protocol that's out, and that kind of sets the conditions, because if you wanted to have carbon accounting, you really have to follow what the protocol is saying. And briefly, what was put into the protocol is that at least there needs to be 3 studies conducted that show efficacy and the conditions in which the feed additive works. For example, few of the feed additives are affected by diet, so this needs to be established, and you have to do it in at least those 3 studies, and those studies need to be published in a peer-reviewed journal, and they need to be independently conducted, and also the peer review journal has to be SCI indexed. So unfortunately, these days you can publish anything. You can find a journal that publish anything if you pay money. So it has to be an SCI indexed peer review journal in order to be counted for that. And specifically in California, we're working with Air Resources Board, and we're looking into the experimental design and making sure that it's appropriate design for the level of effectiveness that's expected from the feed additives. And regulatory bodies have their own requirements as well in terms of the impact on health, in terms of the environmental conditions, the effect on the environment, so that feed additives do not have unintended consequences. So as long as it doesn't harm the animal, it doesn't have any other effect on the environment, the efficacy is being established by at least 3 independent studies in a peer-reviewed journal. I think those are the main conditions that would help move this thing along.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's currently funding being made available for projects in this area, correct? Can you tell us a little bit more about these opportunities?
Yeah, so there are more and more of opportunities coming up, and very recently, the U.S. and the European Union announced the Global Methane Pledge, basically to reduce methane emissions by 30% by 2030. And since then, over 100 countries have joined that pledge, and together there is now the Global Methane Hub that has raised well over to $200 million. And according to the CEO, about $70 to $100 million will be spent on agriculture-related methane reduction. So basically, it's going to be mostly on the livestock, on quite a bit of it on the feed additive as well. So in the next few months, they will be coming up with requests for proposals, and so there will be around between $70 to $100 million. On top of that, there's the Aim for Climate Alliance. So that is an alliance between the United States and United Arab Emirates, and that's specifically to reduce methane as well. And they have also raised about $200 million for methane work. It's not just livestock, but overall methane reduction. And they will also be working with Global Methane Hub, and we expect that they will be coming up with requests for proposals in the next few months as well. Another one, by comparison, is not as much, is the FFAR, and they have slated about $5 million specifically for methane from livestock, and that request for proposal is also expected to come in very shortly. So these are some of the the big ones that are over there. This is on top of all the other funding opportunities that's been happening so far. It hasn't been all that much, but I think with this new stream of funding, we should be able to see more work happening in this area to reduce methane emissions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, you do a lot of research and obviously read a lot of research in this area. In your opinion, what solutions do you think are looking most promising for California in the near term?
In the near term, I think the feed, it just depends on regulatory approvals. So a lot of the feed additives are maturing, are ready. So if regulatory approval is not a hindrance, then I would say that the feed additive would be a good solution in the near term. We've seen that with California trying to reduce methane in general by 40% by 2030. Right now, if you go the way we are going, we're not going to be able to meet that. So we do need something else. I mean, so far it's been reducing the number of animals, and the manure management is what has been happening. So I think Enteric has a big role to play, and I'm sure the panelists will talk about how effective their products are, but some of the effectiveness are just staggering. So I think I see that feed additives and Enteric needs to be part of the whole plan for California to get us into the.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And some exciting things are coming down the pipe. Okay, let's turn now to Joan, if we could, please. Good morning, Joan.
Good morning.
Blue Ocean Barns recently coordinated with the USDA and CDFA to have the largest and longest study of red seaweed supplement conducted here in California on the Strauss family creamery. The results, as Ermias was alluding to, were very promising. It looked like an average of reduction of about 52%. Can you tell us a little bit more about the results of the trial and where your company's at, next steps that you're looking to take?
Sure. And thank you, Denise. Yeah, we do have some news on the red seaweed front. As you may know, many California cows have been munching on kelp and other seaweeds for some time, but Asparagopsis, red seaweed, just got its commercial farm debut last summer. The trial at the Strauss Organic Dairy Farm involved 48 cows for 50 days, and it was a significant success. It really proved that a carbon positive dairy economy is within reach. So there were three major takeaways from the trial. First, Asparagopsis was proven again to be safe for cows when, let's say, about a half a cup is included into the ration daily, basically like a sprinkling of cilantro. Second, it's safe for humans too, and Asparagopsis does not change the taste or chemistry of the milk or the meat. And third, Asparagopsis is a digestive aid that proves to be the single most effective burp suppressant for cows. So a little more on that. Regarding safety, as you mentioned, CDFA was involved in the trial. So CDFA and a PhD who recently actually graduated from Ermias's lab conducted extensive sampling, especially of milk for any residues. And there's really never been a seaweed trial with greater statistical power in the analysis of milk than this most recent Strauss trial. Results from the current study and also from previous studies have shown that milk residues in cows that eat Asparagopsis do not vary significantly from cows not fed Asparagopsis. We also learned in the trial that after a brief acclimation to the diet, cows maintained DMI, maintained milk production components, milk quality, flavor, and freshness, just as they had done in earlier trials. Milk iodine was predictably elevated in this trial, given that the Asparagopsis that was used in the study was wild harvested from Portugal. Blue Ocean Barn's own US-grown variety of Asparagopsis, which is cultivated in seawater-fed tanks in San Diego and Hawaii, accumulates about 95% less iodine than wild ocean Asparagopsis. So last, regarding burp suppression, cows fed the red seaweed, as you mentioned, averaged methane gas reductions of over 50%, with several cows emitting more than 85% less gas. And one really adorable little Jersey cow named Dallas emitted 92% less gas. So if we hadn't seen it before in 6 earlier trials, we would have been shocked. But this data just affirms what we've seen in earlier studies. So following the success of the Strauss trial, Blue Ocean Barns presented to the CDFA the full results to the task committee. We also submitted our independent conclusion that Asparagopsis is generally recognized as safe as a digestive aid. After its review, CDFA issued us a no objections letter. They approved our labels as a natural remedy within the California Livestock Drug Program, and they granted provisional certificates of registration for both our certified organic and our non-organic formulations of brominata. So we're open for both business in California, and we're thrilled to be working with farm families in our state. So you asked what's next. Quickly, in repeated randomized controlled trials, as I mentioned, the magnitude of emissions reductions and the safety for cows and humans has been consistently validated. So that's done. However, in 2 trials, university researchers observed significant feed conversion efficiencies, over 10%. Cows are apparently making better use of their feed and requiring less of it to produce the same amount of milk. And we need to understand that better. We'll work on that in 2022. That represents real money to California's farmers. So in 2022, we'll conduct on-farm demonstrations, and we'll also connect with university research on our US product called brominata to bring those financial benefits to farmers into sharper focus and to dial in a consistent product batch to batch that meets the need of farm families. So that's where we are.
Pretty exciting, pretty exciting. I know several of us are exciting about this, but there has been some concern about the availability of seaweed. What do you see as the greatest opportunities and challenges for commercial availability of seaweed as we go into the future?
Good question, Denise. So it turns out that growing asparagus is not as easy as it might look. We sponsored marine science research at Dr. Jen Smith's lab at UC San Diego starting 4 years ago. And this work has equipped our scientists and engineers to build a proprietary cultivation system. And that system allows for continuous harvest of the red seaweed and really an unimaginable yield per acre per year because of the design of the system. And of course, as you mentioned, this is vital for cost-effective scale production and for the availability of the product globally. So Blue Ocean Barns has solved problems of growing at scale and began ramping up production and product formulation earlier this year. We've been harvesting and minimally processing the brominata since the beginning of the year, stockpiling it, and we will begin distributing it to dairies in California next month, first in Sonoma County, and later this year in the Central Valley. And if I could just say one last thing, our company is thrilled because we really appreciate the initiative that we've seen from California farm families. Yesterday, Marcus Benedetti spoke to this a bit in a session at his conference, describing Clover Sonoma as a pioneer, able to take certain risks in piloting new ideas. Of course, we see that in spades at Strauss and at numerous other dairies within the state. We're working with folks who are committed to extending California's lead as the most delicious and sustainable dairy in the world. And our product is a key ingredient for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joan. Let's move now to Mark, if we could. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Mark, just a quarter teaspoon of Bovaer per cow per day consistently reduces enteric methane emissions by approximately 30% for dairy cows, and we're hearing of even higher percentages for beef cows. Bovaer has received market approval in Brazil and Chile, which is very exciting, and most recently, a landmark approval from the European Union or the EU. In the US, you're still awaiting FDA approval for commercial use. Can you share with us the latest status of Bovaer availability? When do you anticipate receiving FDA approval, and what does this mean for the overall rollout of Bovaer?
Yep. Well, let me start by saying that the regulatory approvals are an extremely important step, right, for bringing methane methodologies and technologies to the market, as already indicated also by Armaias, right? Because the dairy sector and the consumers need to be very confident that the products are safe and effective, as Joan also mentioned in her speech. And just as an example, only 2 months ago, we saw a product with a claim on methane reduction actually abandon the EU registration track as it was unable to answer these questions of the EU authorities. So I think it's healthy that there's a very stringent regulatory approval process so that what the farmer uses is, of course, safe and effective. Now, coming back to the US and your question, we're still awaiting the approval for the commercial use of Bovaer in the US. Committed to make this work as quickly as we can, working aggressively against it. I think timelines are difficult to predict, as we can imagine. And while we advance on our US approvals, we will continue to pursue approvals also in other markets and have received a number of those. So like you mentioned, Brazil, Chile, most recently the EU, and we expect a number of other markets to open up in the next 12 months for us. And therefore, for us, we're now shifting really from pure registration and science activities to focusing towards commercialization and scaling up production further.
Right. How quickly do you anticipate adoption throughout the EU, and what kind of interest are you seeing so far?
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how as soon as you have approval, it even gets there's much more noise and much more excitement, of course. So within a month after our Brazil approval, we concluded a large-scale collaboration with JBS, the largest animal protein company in the world, to provide Bovaer, starting with the Brazilian feedlots, but thereafter expanding to Australia and as well as the US. Last week, we announced a collaboration with NEPCO. NEPCO is a leading Australian beef producer who today already has a carbon neutral beef product and would actually use Bovaer to make that more sustainable itself. In Europe, right, where we actually have received the market approval, will officially launch early May. A company like Friesland Campina, which is of course a large dairy company, global dairy company, will start to pilot the product at scale at about 200 dairy farms later this year. And just 2 weeks ago, we also announced that we are working with Danone in Europe, in the Benelux, specifically where Bovaer will be an essential component to get it have Danone or enable Danone to make a net zero Actimel, right? So one of their leading products there. So we see this momentum building. We expect a number of other announcements over the next weeks and months. Just to give an indication, I think this is easily reaching probably close to 50, more than 50, probably closer to 100,000 cows by the end of the year.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we will await FDA approval here. Let's turn now to Peter. Good morning, Peter. So your product, Agrolin, is already being fed to about 1.5 million dairy cows around the world. It's actually the only commercial available methane-reducing feed additive that's being used on California dairies today. And it improves feed efficiency while also reducing enteric methane reduction by about 10%. What has been done to credibly quantify and verify those methane reductions that people are talking about? Uh-oh, Peter, we can't hear you.
Uh-huh.
There we go. There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Yep, now we can.
Didn't
Thank
do
you.
anything? Okay, we're all right. So thank you, Denise. So the answer is a lot has been done to verify these methane emissions. So let's start in California. Dr. Frank Mitloehner and his team at UC Davis have carried out a trial looking at enteric emissions from cows fed Agrolin compared to control cows. This is being published, and it shows just over 11% reduction in methane, as well as lower ammonia and nitrous oxide enteric emissions as well. Dr. Mitloehner's work replicates other research institute trials that have been carried out earlier, that have been summarized in a published 23 trial meta-analysis of the effects of Agrolin. 8 of those trials looked at enteric methane reduction. The others looked at milk production efficiency and productivity. And those enteric reductions are across a range of different feeding situations and show about a 10% reduction in methane. Further recent trial from Blanca Research Station in Spain, an excellent facility, feeds pretty similar to the USA. That's just been completed, and that showed a 12% reduction in enteric methane. And we've also done additional research looking at methane reductions in beef animals as well. So there's plenty of evidence, but trials are and will continue. We've got a beef trial that's underway at Lethbridge in Canada, in conjunction with Nestle and Starbucks, as well as Dairy Management Inc. There are on-farm trials looking at methane reduction, as well as performance. They're being carried out in California. So Trinkler Dairy has been mentioned several times over the last 3 days. So they are looking at Agrolin, and also the other is in Florida. And we've got further research that is underway or planned at other major institutes here in the USA. You mentioned that 1.5 million cows are already being fed Agrolin, and actually now this is significantly higher and it's growing. In the USA, we're somewhere over 300,000 cows that are being fed Agrolin. And why is that? Well, we have many trials that have looked at the return to farmers over and above any benefit of methane reduction. So on average, the improvements in feed efficiency and energy corrected milk are around about 4%. So about 3 pounds more energy corrected milk with no increase in feed intake. And this is all at a cost of about 4 or 5 cents per cow per day. So the financial returns to dairy farmers on average are over 10 to 1. So for each dollar spent on Agolin, about over a $10 return. And that doesn't include any carbon credit payments or incentives that might be paid.
Wow. So how are you working with partners throughout the supply chain to help inform producers and promote adoption of your product?
Yeah, thanks. So, well, we're working with dairy farmers, nutrition groups, milk cooperatives, local dairy companies, and in particular, some of the major global food companies. I mentioned Starbucks and Nestle a moment ago, so we have agreements in place with them. We're also working with Barry Callebaut. They're the largest chocolate manufacturers in the world, mainly business to business. They work with Nestle's and Hershey's and those sorts of companies. In conjunction with them, actually, we are establishing carbon offset payments to dairies for using Agolin. Target, another major buyer of dairy products, we're working with them, and we're in discussions with several others. And all of them are wanting to source milk from Agolin-fed cows, and they're sponsoring trials on dairies to demonstrate Agolin benefits to the dairy farmer. And why is that? Well, first of all, they like that Agolin is made from essential oil extracts from herbs. So these components are cleared for use by the FDA. They're generally recognized as safe. They're used in human foods every day, so a very positive image. Second, they like the fact that Agolin has a positive financial return for the dairies, regardless of any methane reduction and any incentives or carbon credits that may be available. We have many trials that demonstrate the feed efficiency and energy corrected benefits of Agolin, as I've already explained, and quite a number of those are published. And there is a lot of work ongoing. I believe we have 9, maybe 10 split herd trials on large dairies underway at present across the United States. These are independently evaluated with the objective of publishing the results. So we continue to demonstrate the benefit on dairies in California and across the country. And then, of course, the third reason they want to work with us is that they like that we're reducing methane, helping to reduce their carbon footprint. So in time, it may well be that Agolin can be added to another product, such as ones we've heard of today, to produce even greater reductions. But for now, Agolin is available, and it's the product of choice.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Okay, let's move finally to Thomas. Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning.
So Moorow Ruminant is a natural feed supplement that significantly reduces methane emissions from cattle. Tell us what percentage of reduction you're seeing in dairy and in the beef sector as well. And can you tell us a little bit about what role carbon credits, I believe you call them cow credits, play in your business model and how they help promote adoption of the product?
Sure. We have seen in dairy cows, we've seen reductions in Holsteins in the UK of around 20%. And we've seen in Jersey cows up to about 38%, which is very encouraging. I should add that our product, our product is made from garlic and citrus, and is therefore a natural solution. And like all the other natural solutions, is generally regarded as safe in the United States. So turning to your questions on carbon credits, well, from the beginning, it was always clear to us that having a product that can make a big dent in methane emissions is great, but that in the absence of either an obvious payer or there being other compelling reasons for farmers to invest in a feed supplement like neutral, we would have to create a market mechanism that provides the stimulus to large-scale adoption. A market mechanism where every single stakeholder, from the cow to governments, participates and benefits. Carbon credits are an important alignment in that quest. A first proof of concept week was created with a British commercial farm with over 400 cows, who have been feeding Moorow for nearly 3 years now. Our natural feed supplement reduced the cow's enteric methane emissions by an average of 30% on that farm, whilst increasing milk yield by between 3 and 5%. And as a result, this farm started to sell climate-smart barista milk to high-end coffee shops and via selected online stores. This presented an interesting business opportunity for the farm because it allowed them to sell specialty barista milk at a premium, and it brought good news to consumers. as they were offered an environmentally friendly alternative to standard milk. In fact, in all London coffee shops where their milk is available, it completely replaced non-climate standard smart milk within 3 weeks. Together with this farm, we then launched our first carbon project under the VCS program approved by Vera and generated the first ever carbon credits based on enteric fermentation, and have already sold them at premium price to non-food corporations and returned all of the proceeds except for an admin fee for running the project to the farmers. This is important because that almost covers the cost of the product by itself. And on top of that, you've got the productivity increases, which deliver extra benefits in financial returns to the farmers. And as I mentioned in the beginning, our cow credit model will allow us in the near future to offset the purchasing price of Moorow Ruminant, as I just said, making it one of the most attractive and efficient solutions to reduce methane emissions for farmers. It allows the beef and dairy industry to immediately and transparently reduce or offset emissions in the supply chain locally. To sum up, cow credits help to transparently connect all stakeholders in our business and are a means to redirect the financial burden away from the farmer and to those that can benefit the most from a reduction of on-farm emissions, the beef and dairy industry. To make an enteric methane reduction with solution successful, a business model is needed in which all stakeholders benefit and which consequently promotes the adoption of the solution. We are proud to have gathered proof points that our circular business model is doing just that. And we are currently scaling that to many thousands of cows in the UK and soon also other countries like the US. But before I conclude on your question, coming back to our product, being a biotech company at heart, apart from already having a great first product, we're already working on several future generations of amazing products that will deliver not only an ever greater reduction of methane, but also amazing farmer benefits in terms of health and productivity, allowing us to deliver on our vision of any cow, any age, any setting, and no cost to the farmer.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of all stakeholders being able to benefit, especially our producers. Can you talk a little bit more about your rollout plans here, specifically in the US and California?
Sure. We have, as I said earlier, we have a call to action program in the UK where we are gathering a great data, and we're going to do that in the US as well. So with the US being one of the countries with the highest consumptions of animal protein per capita, the US beef dairy industry are, of course, under increasing pressure to reduce emissions, as we've already heard from all previous speakers. So, and we want to help with that transformation towards an even more sustainable system. So our main goal is to put our solution in as many animals, beef and dairy, as possible to have a maximum impact on our climate in the United States as well. As mentioned before, we are now scaling up in dairy cows in the UK and have just launched a call to action program, eventually feeding more than 20,000 dairy cows in the UK alone this year to further validate our model and to gain valuable insights and data points from commercial dairy farms. We are currently working on similar programs to run here in the US, starting with beef in Texas, where we've already lined up steakhouses that will buy the resulting beef to serve climate-friendly beef for the first time in the United States, followed by dairy right here in California. So being a British company, we will also soon formally open our US operations with a base right here in the US. It is our objective in the US to prove our product in local settings, create an amazing experience for farmers and their animals, and to prove that where there is demand, there is supply, and vice versa, so that we can scale this real fast, driven by large corporate demand. Because that is what's going to drive, in our view, we can only scale this fast if there's large corporate demand driving it down into the supply chains, and that the supply chains get compensated for adopting supplements to reduce methane. Excuse me.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, if we could bring everyone back up, I have some general questions for the panel. I do have one to start off with Dr. Ermias. Dr. Kabrab, could some of these additives approach enteric reductions in different ways? And we've heard one of the speakers alluded to it already this morning about products potentially being stacked. In other words, can they be combined to produce an even greater emissions reductions when combined in feed? Is this possible?
Yes, basically it just depends on how those products are working. What's the mode of action of these products? So if the products such as the red seaweed or brominata, I think we should call it from now on, or the 3-NOP, they're both sort of mostly on targeting the methanogens and reducing emissions by inhibiting the methanogenesis process, while Agoling and Mutral would be more on the modifying the rumen environment. So you could combine those and get an additive effect. In fact, there was a paper published last year that combined oil and 3-NOP together, and it showed that when you put the two together, you have an additive effect, so much more reduction in emissions. I think it went over 50%. And there's another one that was done in Australia also with the 3-NOP and lipid supplements and ionophores. And I think that result showed up to 90%. So there is a way to stack up those the different feed additives to get them even a bigger impact on reducing emissions.
Wow, that would be very exciting, very promising. Okay, so this question is really for all of you. So I guess any one of you can jump in as you see fit, and then other ones can tag on. What are the biggest barriers to making these products commercially available and bringing these products to market, especially in a place like California?
Yeah, shall I can start with that. So for Agolin, as far as we're concerned, I think it's incentives. Dairy farmers are very concerned that they'll be left carrying the cost of reducing enteric methane emissions on their farms. You know, they're already under significant financial pressure, and they feel that additional money should be made available to help with the burden of reducing enteric methane. So performance benefits that some of us have talked about certainly can help, but carbon credits or any other sorts of incentives would certainly drive the uptake a lot quicker.
Yeah. Others want to tag additional onto that?
Yeah, happy to add as well. I think next to that, it's building a credible accounting system, right? Make it easy indeed to demonstrate you've done a good job, right? You don't want to have 10 different systems, one for my manure management, one for my enteric, one for my feed, one for my whatever else, right? So to make this easy, ideally integrated, I think would be another big lever to really drive that sustainability train forward substantially.
Great. How can we ensure these products are utilized when they become available, and what should the state be doing to create these, incentivize their use?
Well, ultimately, I think, if I may go with that, ultimately, I think the state could mandate that methane reducers, as they're being made available, are being used in dairy cows. I think that would be, and we see some governments already working towards that. I think that would be the ultimate goal, that it is the new norm, and it has to be implemented. And until then, we'll have to find other ways to stimulate demand.
Yeah,
if I can just add, there are now cases that are happening where governments and local jurisdictions are providing incentives. I've seen that, sort of, for example, Belgium is now offering farmers incentives. For example, if they use 3-NOP, they get 7 euro cents per cow per day. And then there's added, if they use other things also, then that's added to that as well. So it's not gonna cover the whole cost, but if you have some incentive like that, and then there is a mechanism for carbon credits, getting for carbon credit as well, which we now have the protocols to be able to do that. So if you combine the incentives and credits, then I think that might help in quick adoption of the technologies.
Indeed,
Yeah,
we're working
sorry. Go ahead.
We're already working with a government that is looking to give us a forward contract on all the carbon credits we can generate in that country, buying them from us at a fixed price, which allows to cover our cost of our product and a capped profit, and then cross-selling those credits into their local cap and trade market, therefore helping them with their own emission goals as a country, and obviously making the entire dairy and beef industry methane reduced in one fell swoop and not costing anything to the taxpayer or farmers.
Yeah, but there I think we need to be a bit careful that you don't start double counting, right? I think there's the devil's in the detail,
Sure.
because as soon as the dairy sector sells off the credits and it goes to whatever, an airline or whatever, then the airline will say we're flying carbon neutral, but the dairymen will still have the same footprint as they had before. So I think there it's really important to look at the nuance and where does the credit go and how will it be utilized.
The government will be buying the credit in that case. And that the cost that they give us for that will cover the cost of the product, and as I said, some small profit. But then sell those credits to cap and trade or the compliance market to retire them there. So there will only be one buyer and one party that will retire. The government acts as an in-between.
So I would
you're
say
definitely correct. We definitely want to keep those credits, within the dairy food chain. And as far as incentives, I would just comment back to you that, we certainly have seen incentive programs for producers be very successful here in California. So hopefully we can stay that track to encourage adoption of these as well. Another question for you.
Sorry, I think preferably that rather than mandating. I think incentives helping to cover the cost of a product. Ours, for example, at 4 cents, small price to pay for a 10% reduction in methane. There are other incentives, carbon credit payments, or maybe even a milk bonus. But I don't think there's any need to mandate. I think these products are good enough return in addition to incentive that there won't be a need for mandating.
I totally agree with you, Peter. And further, I would say, Tom earlier mentioned kind of the obvious payer, looking for that entity who has a very strong incentive, who really is motivated to be the payer in this system, I think is critical. And Denise, I think you and I thought about this earlier, but I really do feel like food corporations who have made really bold public targets, especially science-based targets, initiative targets, where they must take those emissions out of their own supply chain. They can't buy offsets from someone else in order to, cover these. Those folks have already invested lots of money in, electrifying their fleet or putting solar on top of their factory, roofs or whatever. They're already used to making investments in order to decarbonize their supply chains. And so I think they will see the attractiveness of within their own supply chains, providing the necessary incentives for their farmers to adopt.
Okay, very good. Next question. What is the opportunity really here that you see for partnering with farmers and global food companies? And Joan, you touched on this a little bit, but does anybody have an additional comments on how we could utilize that to encourage solutions throughout the supply chain?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I think working with big retailers, I think that is really helping a lot, because they're going to be working across the entire sector. And we're working with Nestle and Starbucks and those big retailers. They do have they need to supply the milk and meat and all that. So working with that at that level would really help in getting those technologies implemented.
Yeah, so I think there's major opportunities. I've talked a bit about what we're already doing with those major, the global food companies. What I'd say is that we're all in this together, and it's critical that for the future of our industry that we do work on this reduction of methanes. There's plenty of competitors to milk out there. We need to be seen to continue tackling climate change challenges. Dairy's done a fantastic job already through efficiency improvements. Lots of activities well detailed at this conference. Enteric reductions offer another significant opportunity to show just how active we are. And the sooner we move forward with tackling enteric methane reductions, the better for all of us. And the global food companies are absolutely on board with that.
I think there are multiple entry points from our perspective. I mean, we need, like we're doing in the UK, where we are ramping up dairy cows on neutral, whilst also driving demand to those farmers. I think we also need to work, like Mark has said, that they've done a deal with JBS, working with those animal protein producers so that product is available, climate smart product becomes available, and at the same time driving demand through the demand drivers to actually uptake that climate smart beef and dairy is key to that, so that we have a good balance of supply and demand, and that there's no excuse for people not adopting because there's no demand, or people not buying because there's no supply. And I think that in our discussions has been crucial.
Exactly. And I think it's really that combination, not only of the processors, right? And those have they're the first step down the chain, right? So that's the most logical step. They are the ones that are incentivizing, of course, the farmers, or could incentivize. It's then really connecting that to the fast moving consumer goods companies, but also, and what I don't hear too much here yet, is the food and beverage service companies, right? I think that sector really also needs to get fully on board. It's not only the retailer and the Nestle's and the Danones of this world, but it's also the supermarket chains that will play a role here.
Or our QSRs. You can name any one of them without mentioning a name. 71% of their carbon footprint comes from their supply chain, and 75% of that comes from beef and dairy. How are they going to make their goals if they don't reduce enteric fermentation methane? Yeah, never.
Okay, very good comments and a very, very fruitful discussion. We thank you all this morning for spending time with us. We certainly appreciate all of the dialogue this morning. And before we sign off, I want to say a quick thank you to our audience and all of the great questions. We did have several questions come in. We got through a few of them, but we have a few more. So please just know that I will direct those to the individual presenter that they are requested of, and they'll follow up with you directly after the summit. And finally, as we close out, I would just say, if you could stick around, we have some award presentations is our next event this morning. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having us.